Thank you for being with us. This is Pillars of History. I'm very grateful to have you here. Let's listen to this speech first, then we shall come back and comment on it. Thank you.
Yesterday, I did something that no African leader has done in decades. I picked up the phone and told the most powerful man in the world exactly what I thought about his plan to destroy my people's future. That man was Donald Trump. And what I told him? It's about to change everything you think you know about how small nations deal with superpowers. But before I tell you what happened on that call, because trust me, it was explosive, you need to understand what was really at stake. This wasn't just about trade. This wasn't just about economics. This was about whether 22 million people would eat tomorrow, or whether they'd become refugees fleeing a continent that the world has already written off. My name is Ibrahim Traore. I'm 35 years old. I run Burkina Faso, and yesterday I declared war on the system that's been bleeding Africa dry for centuries. Stay with me, because what I'm about to tell you will explain why every intelligence agency in Washington is now watching my every move. 3 days ago, my economic advisors rushed into my office with news that made my blood run cold. The United States was about to impose a 30% tariff on everything we export to America. Not 5%, not 10%, 30%. To put that in perspective, that's not a trade adjustment. That's economic execution. But here's what really got to me. Here's what made me pick up that phone and do something that could either save my country or get me killed. They didn't even have the courtesy to warn us first. We found out the same way everyone else did, through rumors, through leaked documents, through the whispers of diplomats who couldn't look us in the eye, as if 22 million people weren't worth a phone call before you destroy their economy. That's when I knew this wasn't about trade policy. This was about sending a message that Africa should know its place, that we should be grateful for whatever scraps fall from their table, that we should never, ever forget who's really in charge.
I love these speeches because in this digital revolution that we are in, you cannot fail to get the real information in a given period of time.
They were wrong. Let me tell you something about the phone call that's got Washington talking. Because what happened in those 23 minutes wasn't diplomacy, it was a reckoning. When Trump's voice came through that secure line, I could hear it immediately. The tone you use when you're talking to someone you don't consider an equal, the casual dismissal, the assumption that I'd called to beg. He started talking about America's economic interests, about protecting American jobs, about how these tariffs were necessary for America's future. I let him finish. Then I said something that I guarantee no American president has heard from an African leader in decades.
Listen.
I said, "Mr. President, let me tell you about my economic interests." The line went quiet, and that's when I told him exactly what his 30% tariff would do to my people. But here's the part that really got his attention. Here's the part that made him realize he wasn't dealing with the kind of African leader he was used to. I told him about Sarah. Sarah is 23 years old. She works in a textile factory in Ouagadougou. She supports her mother, her 2 younger brothers, and her own infant daughter on the wages she makes sewing clothes that get shipped to American stores. When Trump's tariff hits, Sarah doesn't just lose her job, she loses everything. Her family goes hungry, her daughter stops getting the medication she needs, her brothers drop out of school to try to find work that doesn't exist. And Sarah becomes one of the millions of young Africans who start looking north, toward Libya, toward the Mediterranean, toward the boats that sometimes make it to Europe and sometimes don't. That's what a 30% tariff looks like in human terms. That's what America first means when you're on the wrong side of it. I told Trump all of this, and then I told him something that made him very, very quiet. I said, "Mr. President, you can destroy our textile industry today, but when 10 million young Africans start moving toward your allies in Europe because their economies collapsed, don't call me asking why your migration crisis just got 10 times worse." You see, here's what these people never seem to understand. When you destabilize African economies, you don't just hurt Africans. You create problems that end up on your doorstep, whether you want them there or not. But the real moment, the moment when I knew this call was going to change everything, came when Trump asked me something I wasn't expecting. He said, "What do you want?" Not, "What can we do to help?" Not, "How can we work together?" Just, "What do you want?" As if this was a negotiation, as if my people's survival was something I needed to bargain for. That's when I told him something that I don't think any African leader has ever said to an American president. I said, I don't want anything from you, Mr. President. I want you to stop taking from
That
us.
is a point. Point noted.
The silence on that line lasted so long, I thought the call had dropped. Then he asked me to explain what I meant, and that's when I told him about the real cost of doing business with America. For every dollar of aid America gives Africa, African countries send back $5 in debt payments, resource extraction, and unfavorable trade terms. We're not being helped. We're being harvested. The African Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA, that everyone talks about like it's some great gift to Africa. It's designed to keep us exactly where we are. Suppliers of raw materials, buyers of finished goods, never competitors, never equals. But here's what really shocked him. Here's what made him realize that this wasn't going to be the conversation he was expecting. I told him I'd been studying his trade policies. All of them, not just the ones affecting Africa. I knew about the deals he'd made with China. I knew about the concessions he'd given to Europe. I knew about the exceptions he'd carved out for countries that had the power to fight back. And I asked him a simple question. Why do you think Africa deserves less respect than China? You want to know how Trump responded to that? He didn't. He changed the subject. Started talking about security cooperation, about counterterrorism, about how America helps keep Africa stable. That's when I told him something that really got his attention. I said, Mr. President, you want to talk about security? Let me tell you what real insecurity looks like. See, here's what they don't understand in Washington. The biggest security threat to Africa isn't terrorism, it's economic desperation. When young people can't find work, they don't just disappear, they join whatever organization promises them a future. Sometimes that's terrorist groups. Sometimes it's criminal networks. Sometimes it's migration routes that end in tragedy. But all of these problems start with the same thing, an economy that can't provide for its people. So when America imposes tariffs that destroy African jobs, they're not just hurting our economy. They're creating the exact conditions that breed the instability they claim to be fighting. I told Trump that if he really wanted to fight terrorism in Africa, the best thing he could do would be to give young Africans a reason to stay home. Give them jobs, give them hope, give them a future worth fighting for. But that requires treating Africa as a partner, not a charity case. It requires respecting our right to develop our own industries, not just extract our resources. And it definitely doesn't include imposing tariffs that could push millions of people into poverty.
I love these speeches because in this digital revolution that we are in, you cannot fail to get the real information in a given period of time. Because today, in this digital revolution, everything is in light. You cannot actually hide the truth because the truth will always be the first, mainly in this digital revolution. Yeah, so that is the speech. He's talking about facts. Don't overlook, don't look here and look there, don't look. No, just concentrate on facts. You know what I call facts? These are things that you need to pick up from the story. This is Captain Ibrahim Traore. And mind you, don't think that he cannot do that. Indeed, he can, and he is willing to do. Because this is the man who doesn't actually take shit or fear like that. He doesn't fear because he has that military courage to say whatever comes in his mind and he thinks that it is true. So this is Captain Ibrahim Traore, the current president of Burkina Faso. So if you don't understand him, you will understand him either by force or by peaceful means. That is him. You cannot hide the truth. Yeah, Captain Ibrahim Traore. Big up, big up. You people all who listen to these stories, always comment, share, and get more insights, because we have also our enemies who always watch us. They watch these kind of stories. They feel jealousy, and they are the ones who don't want this kind of message to pass on to other people. But we are here to push this narrative because we are the ones who need Africa to be enlightened. Yeah, thank you.